Welcome to the Market Me podcast with your host, Mike Moll. Each episode of Market Me deconstructs real campaigns for actual businesses to improve their marketing efforts. Mike is the founder of Social Media House and a digital marketing consultant who teaches marketing strategy to executives and their teams from small business to Fortune 500 companies. Let's get started.
On today's episode of Market Me, we're speaking with Melanie Colling. Colling?
No S.
Damn it. Got it. Colling from Experts on Air. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Tell us about your business.
Sure. So we are Experts on Air. We do what we say on the tin. So we help experts get on air, which means podcasting. So we focus at the moment on Asia Pacific. We know there's a couple of agencies that do the same thing in the US and the UK, but not so many that focus on Australia, New Zealand and Asia countries. So that's kind of where we've started. But we do go beyond that with our hosts and guests. So we've got a couple of arms to the business. One of them is podcast production, so helping experts create their own podcast so they can get their content out there. And that's really what we're all about with the podcast is creating content from it. We also do training, so if people want to learn how to do a podcast themselves, we teach them how to do that. A lot of people are interested in the technology and how it all works in the background. So that's one arm. And then the bit that I'm kind of more interested in and where I kind of get more involved is the podcast booking agency. So we connect podcast hosts with good quality guests, and we help guests get on more podcasts, and we help hosts find, the right guests to match their audience, etc. So that's the bit that I really like.
Yeah, I love that. Walk me through how that works, like how a typical engagement with you would work.
Yeah, sure. So we engage both hosts and guests. So we look for hosts that have a good audience and that match our experts that we have on our lists. And when we say a good host, it doesn't necessarily have to be, that they've got a massive following and a massive audience. It's actually that they've got the right audience. There's a couple of things that we look for in a host. That they've got engagement with their audience, which means that they're posting frequently. So, weekly is ideal. Their podcast comes out weekly. Fortnightly is okay. Monthly is a bit, we like to have that more regular engagement with their audience. And also that they've been posting regularly and over a period of time, because podcasting is a bit of a longer game. And we like to see that they've got that engagement and they've built it up over time. So then we know that they've got an engaged audience. So it doesn't have to be volume. It's just got to be quality, really. And when we're looking for guests, we're looking for people that are experts in their field or their industry that really want to take it to their business to the next level and get out there and connect with more people. And podcasting is a great way to do that. And I really love podcasting because it's a conversation between two people, and then it's shared to the audience. But it's a way of creating a connection. And through a conversation, you get to know each other as the host and the guest. And that way the audience gets to know both of you through that conversation. It's not a sales pitch. So I think we're kind of all a bit, over getting sold to. But when we have a conversation, then we get to know the person that's talking. And through the trust that we've built with the host, if we're a listener of that podcast, then that guest is introduced into that, circle of trust, and people get to know them. And, that's how they make a connection and they say, oh, I really like what that person was talking about. I need to go and find out more. And that's up to the listener to go and make that next step to find out more. There's no pitch or anything on the podcast. So that's the bit that I really like, is that it's a conversation between two people that people can make a connection with those people.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think the thing I love about it the most is, the content, it doesn't have as produced of a feel. It doesn't feel like it's a news segment.
Yep.
And I think at the end of the day, I think, the growth of people that listen to podcasts, I think there's just like such a great space. People like being the fly on the wall. They like being those, they like kind of knowing what's going on behind the scenes. And there's really nothing other than, like Instagram stories. There's really nothing like that in the world right now. So it's a fascinating medium. I'm going super all in on it from my standpoint. And I do love it. The connections that you build and the people that you can introduce other people to on the back end of having it has been a fascinating experiment for me. So I'd love to hear your opinion. I'm sure that you guys get a lot of inquiries that people think I should start a podcast. What would you say, like, what are the parameters? How do you think about if you should start a podcast or not?
Sure. So the first question we ask when people say, I want to start a podcast is why? Why do you want to start it? And there's a lot of different reasons why people want to start a podcast, but we really focus on people that want to start a podcast for their business. So, we're about experts, we're about showcasing experts and getting them out to more people. And that is obviously, a strategy in their business to grow. So that's really where we focus. I do run a meetup group here in Melbourne because I'm in Melbourne, Australia. We're called Melbourne Podcasters, and we get a whole range of different people coming along to that. So people that are just hobbyists. Someone just started a podcast on a movie that they liked and it went crazy. So,
right.
You can start it on anything. But if someone says, why, I want to start a podcast, I always say, why? Is it something that you just like to do for fun? Is it something that you want to use as a strategy in your business, or is there another reason? Because then it depends on, is podcasting the right thing for you to do? Like, there might be other ways that you can get to that end point without podcasting, but it might be that podcasting is the right thing to do. So it's really a question of why do they want to start one?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I have my opinion on what the strategy is and what it should be, but I'd love to hear some thoughts if there's people out there that are thinking about it, whether they're looking for somebody to help them with it or they're just maybe going to try and do it on their own. How do you think about I own a business and I think I should have one? What are some of the strategies that you've seen that have worked well? Like, what's a good reason to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So really, if you're in a business and you are the business, so, you may have started this business, you may be a consultant, you may have written a book, you may be a speaker, you might be a coach, kind of that, a one-on-one kind of business. Podcasting is really a great way for you to go one to many. And that's one of the strategies that you can use to do that. And there's other strategies to use, but podcasting really allows you to then go and talk to many more people and get your content out there. So a lot of those businesses, the content is in people's heads. And they'll slowly build a team and they'll get a couple of people working for them, and they may then have other consultants that come in and maybe use their framework or something, but majority of the stuff is in their head. And when you get those businesses, it's like, how do you get that information from the expert out for more people? And what better way than talking on a podcast? So it's really a way of getting content out there. And some people that run a business are like, I don't have time to put processes and systems and, get my information and, put it into a different format that can go one to many, like an online program example. But if you speak on a podcast, all that's recorded, it can be repurposed for many different things. So from a podcast, you can create social media collateral, you can create a newsletter, a blog, you can write a book from a podcast. You can do, you can create an online program just from the content that you get out, and however that is repurposed, you can repurpose it into many different ways. So it's really the fastest and the best use of an expert's time is to talk and then repurpose their content on the back end. So that's the exciting bit about podcasting, I think.
Yeah, that's fascinating, talking about the idea of being able to create or getting close to having like a book or a course just from taking the recordings. I hadn't really considered it that way before, but have you seen that work? Absolutely.
So what you can do, and we do walk through people, we've got like a content matrix where, because a lot of people say, what am I going to talk about? Or, when you go and say, most people say they want to start a podcast or write a book, but they don't know what about. So we have this content matrix where we help people get all the thoughts and ideas out of their head and then kind of put that in some sort of framework. But if you did that with the context of, okay, I want to write a book, let's map out the chapters. And then each chapter becomes, a podcast episode or several, then you can talk about those. So you've got the framework, you map it out, you then record your podcast, you get it transcribed into text, and there comes your book. You send it to an editor or you edit yourself or get someone to do it for you. You kind of got your framework there, and you'll have to go in and, do some sort of editing and additions to it. But you've got the majority of the stuff, which most people say, writing a book, I don't have time to sit down and do that. Well, you don't have to. There's different ways to do it.
I love that. That's very interesting. Just only because I'm such a poor writer and my spelling and my grammar is awful, which is my actually main motivation to start my podcast. Was my team was like, you need to put stuff out. And I had all these notepads with bullet points. I mean, it was terrible. And it took everything in my power to start the podcast. And I was like, oh, you just need me to sit here and answer questions for an hour? I could do that.
Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, people speak differently than they write as well. So actually when you speak something, you're speaking your true language. You're using the words that you would normally use. So therefore, it's a truer sense of you when, that gets transcribed into text. And, like you and a lot of people, Mike, it's, people don't want to sit down and write, or they think I'm not a good writer, I'm not a good enough writer so that I can write a book. But actually, just speaking it is easier, and different people learn in different ways, and different people have different ways of getting their message across. And when, speaking in conversational style, podcasting is really easy for those kind of people to, just get on board, and it's actually an easier way for them to get their content out, like you found.
Yeah, I really like that. And so where are you kind of going with the business? I mean, obviously having people that have the ability for you to reach out on behalf of them, helping start more. I would imagine that also comes with like your services include, editing and creating graphics and social media. Like, do you guys do kind of the full spectrum? Yeah,
so when we do full podcast production, we do end to end. So some people will say, I haven't got time to do that, but I want it done. Right. So that's when they do the full end to end. So, they would record their content, they'd send it to us, we'd post it on all the podcast platforms, we'd create social media collateral, we'd transcribe it, we'd post it for them, everything's done. So that's kind of an end to end service. The training where people want to learn how to do it themselves, we take them through all of those steps and teach them how that's done. And those people have got more time than money, and that's fine. Everybody's different. And they say, and some people actually want to know the technology, and so they're interested in it. And, a lot of people like to know how it works before they take that next step up, because then they understand what they're paying for. Right. So, that sometimes it's a transition step for going full production. And then on the podcast booking agency, where we work with hosts and guests, so sometimes those guests will say, hey, this is really going well and I'm really enjoying being part of the podcast journey. And it's really fun. I can actually see that this is something that I want to do in my business. So they'll come over, and potentially create their own podcast and then become one of our hosts, which is awesome. Yeah. And our podcast hosts will sometimes say, hey, this is really cool. I'd like to get myself on more podcasts as well. And that's also, and some people will say, well, why would I pay an agency to do that for me when I can just go out? And that's fine. A lot of people will go out and find their own bookings, but some people don't have the time, or they don't have the connection. So they can go to a certain point, but then that's as far as they can go with people they know, or people that, they've been recommended to. But with an agency, they've got such a broader reach that you can then tap into that. And, as we build our hosts and our guests, then, the collaboration and the connection that can happen between those. And, we create a community, between those people, and just cool things happen. Like, we had one guest that was interviewed on a podcast. They'd finished recording and the host stopped recording and said, oh my God, that's awesome. I want to be a client. Like, I need what you provide. And so that guest went into that thinking I'm just having a conversation, but actually came out with a client. So how cool is that?
Yeah, that actually happens quite a bit for us. Whether I'm giving somebody some strategy or some advice, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait, can you help me take that to the next level? I'm like, yeah.
Exactly.
Never my intent. And I think people have to be really careful. There's a big difference between making content specifically to try and sell stuff and making content with value in mind that creates transactions on the back end. That's super different. But I've heard, when you run out of stuff to listen to, sometimes you're like, okay, I'll look at the charts. And I used to kind of start going down, and sometimes lower down, you're like, you know what, I'm going to give these 3 a try. Yep. And I've heard some stuff like, I couldn't even get through the first 5 minutes. Like, it was just, oh, you're just going to pat yourself on the back the entire time.
Okay, yeah. It's cringy, isn't it?
Oh, but, I think that's like with any medium, right? If you think about a Facebook ad or a blog or all these things, there's always going to be people that do it at a really high level leading with value, trying to create awesome stuff. And there's always going to be people that are like, join this mastermind, and it's just like piece of crap, bit of content that they try and just upsell you to the next thing, and it doesn't really ever solve your problems.
That's right. And I think that's where people have to understand what podcasting is. And podcasting is about connecting and creating value. And if you do those two things, then you'll be successful in podcasting. But if you think it's a sales tool and you're going to pitch to people, people will switch off straight away. So, you want to encourage listeners to keep listening. So in order to do that, you need to provide them some sort of value along the way to encourage them to continue to listen. And then eventually you will build up trust. People will get to know, like, and trust you, and then they'll do business with you. And so if you think of it like that, and it's like having a conversation face to face, it's just an online version. Like you wouldn't go and pitch to someone like, hi, I'm Mel, buy my service. People will be like, oh my God, crazy. So why would you think that's okay, to do that on a podcast when you're just meeting someone online for the first time? Crazy.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of crazy the way that people think differently about interacting with humans on the internet.
Yeah, they think, well, because I'm behind a screen, I can kind of be a different person, or none of those niceties or protocols apply. But it's just a different version of face to face. Like, treat people as you would like to be treated yourself. That's what I say.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. And so, how are you guys thinking about growth? Are you trying to bring your hosts and your guests kind of up at the same time? It seems like there's a lot of like cross-channel within your own product. But how are you guys, marketing yourselves? How are you guys creating new business?
Yeah. So yes, we do cross pollinate, guests and hosts, and they do take up multiple services, or they might just stick in the lane and say, I'm happy with this arrangement. So we want to kind of build it where we're growing both of the hosts and the guests and the production side. We want to get to a point where we either have an opportunity to partner with another booking agency, for example, that's a bit further on their journey but not focused on our kind of geography area. That's an option for us, and we want to kind of move into more the strategy of it. So how can you use podcasting as a tool to grow your business? And so that's the bit that we enjoy. And when I say we, I've got a business partner, Brett Jarman, and Brett's more of the podcast production side, where I'm the booking agency side. But together we come together and we bring our different skills and experience to that business. And when we're speaking to people about using podcasting, it's more the strategy and how they build their business. So we want to move more into that, and then, maybe we outsource the podcast production, because there's heaps of people that kind of do that. But as long as they know the outcomes that they want from that podcast, which we can help them with. So that's kind of stuff that we're thinking about at the moment. But our focus at the moment is build the agency and podcast production to a point where we've got those options to, maybe go in a different direction.
Got it. Yeah, one thing that I was fascinated by, because I hosted an online event about 5 months ago called Grow Your Personal Brand Using LinkedIn. And I had like 10 business leaders and CEOs come on and talk about how they use LinkedIn for different things. And I used a platform called Hey Summit, which is a guy, Ben, that made it. I don't know if you've heard of it, but really interesting. I have,
yeah.
Yeah, really interesting product. He's from the UK. He's made a couple other softwares. I met him in Texas actually years ago. But I was like, I had been batting around the idea. So I went on Google a keyword planner, and I was like, how many people in a given month search for how to start a podcast? It's a lot.
Yeah,
in North America alone, because that was the only category that I looked at, but in North America alone, there's on average 42,000 searches a month on Google.
Wow.
For how to start a podcast.
That's crazy. Pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, and so I was like playing with this idea, and maybe you can just steal it and run with it, but hosting like a thing where you would interview a bunch of podcast hosts on like how they got started and why, and the strategies and how they've done this and done that, like interview them and almost use them as like lectures inside of an online event called How to Start a Podcast.
That's so cool. It's funny that you say that, Mike, because I've actually been looking at virtual summits, and Hey Summit was one of the pieces of software that I was looking at. You know, because in this challenging times that we've got, it's like everybody's going online, but how do we give people the tools and the information to give them the right information to make that decision about which way do I go, because there's going to be a lot of businesses that are going to have to change the way that they do things, like, you know, online ordering, for example. But then how do they communicate with people? And we're seeing a lot more corporates jumping on podcasting to communicate to their internal teams. So they'll have a podcast for internal and they'll have a podcast for customers and their external. And it's really interesting how they're using that as a platform to communicate, because, you know, the old email gets lost in, you know, your inbox with a million things, and it's not really personal. But if you're actually hearing someone speak, you know, different level of connection. So we have kind of been toying with that idea. So I like that, you know, that you went to Google and you found out how many people were searching for a particular thing, and then, you know, is there a need there, and then how can you fulfill that need and give people the right information so then they can make the right decision for their business and grow it.
You know, and then the other side of it, the other thing I was thinking about, and I actually really like this for you as well, you know, the people that can't afford the consulting, maybe there's an online course that's by you guys. It's like a lower price point. It's a self-serve, comes with some video lessons, but I mean, that would serve that big audience of people looking as well. So maybe there's a play to make a smaller, simpler product. I mean, the only thing I don't like about online courses, and I've been toying with them for different things, is like, can I make this? Can I make someone pay $300 and feel like it should have been 1,000? Because if not, I don't want to do it. So it's like, how do you? And so for me, I was like, even like the idea of making them for like Google AdWords, I'm like, I would have to make a different course for every different industry so that they all felt like it was amazing. So I'm like toying with, how do I maybe have 10 modules, 7 are agnostic to the industry, and then 3 are about the industry, and make it actually feel like that impactful. But you know, as you start to do this training and consulting over and over and over again, maybe having an online product like that would be a good fit for you guys as well.
I love that. And see how our conversation, we're giving each other ideas, and all we're doing is chatting. Like, so cool, isn't it? I love it.
So I am curious, just because, you know, you're so in it. I'm just on the back end kind of in it because I'm posting them, and I mean, we all listen, I guess. But where do you think the industry is going to go as a whole? Obviously, the number of new podcasts coming out and the amount of audio content coming up on the internet is dramatically increasing. Where do you think it's all going? Do you have any speculation?
So it's interesting when you look at the stats for this, because you can see that the stats coming out where podcasting listening is increasing, whereas social media usage is decreasing. So Facebook, Instagram, those kind of things. But it's different for every industry, different for every business, you know, of your product, service, etc. So again, it's where, you know, knowing your business and then what strategy suits you. But just people are jumping on the podcast listening bandwagon. Like, as soon as you mention podcasts to people, they're like, oh my God, have you heard this podcast? Like, they get really excited, and, you know, they love to share what they're listening to. And I think that's really cool. It's also that we're busy and we're also always multitasking. So podcasting is really cool because you can listen to it traveling to and from work, exercising, you know, you're in the car with the kids, dropping them off all over the place. You know, you can listen to a podcast. So it's more accessible to people. And, you know, podcasts can be small snippets of listening. So, you know, you can get a 15-minute one where, you know, you're just going to go down the road and back, and, you know, you can listen to that. So I really think that podcasting is really going to increase. And when a lot of people say, oh, you know, I want to start a podcast, but so many people are doing it. Like, you know, there's so many podcasts. It's like, yeah, there's lots of podcasts, but people have stopped and started them. Like, they're not all active. So actually have a look at the active podcasts.
Right.
And so, yeah, a lot of people think it's a saturated market, but it's actually not. And if you are an expert in a particular thing, then go and share your expertise and let everybody know that that's what you know, because there'll be someone listening that going, hey, I never knew that, and I never knew that person knew that, and I need to connect with them.
I think that's just such a lazy excuse for every industry.
Yeah.
Well, there's so many roofing companies. It can't be done. There's so many people running Google ads. Shut up. There's so much business out there for everybody.
Exactly.
It's just an excuse. Awesome. Well, listen, it's been great learning from you. A lot of great takeaways. Do you guys have anything on your site like an opt-in downloader or anything that you kind of promote?
Yes, so we've got a free masterclass, which is a webinar just talking about podcasting and how to get on board. Awesome. We've got a training session that's starting. I think there's an early bird special, which ends on the 31st of March, so next few days, if people want to learn about how to create their own podcast. And they'll come out of that training with 3 podcast episodes. So that's the ultimate aim, is that you're setting up your podcast at the same time that you're learning about it. And so you'll have 3 episodes, and then you know how to continue with your podcast. And we've got links in there about how to sign up to be, if you've got a podcast at the moment and you want guests, how you can connect with us there. And then obviously if you want to get on more podcasts, how you can be a guest. So it's all there at expertsonair.fm. And we can add some links to your show notes and stuff like that. So
absolutely. What is the FM? What country is that?
It's interesting because FM is a radio station here in Australia.
Same
so
thing.
FM or AM, yeah. So I don't know, Brett came up with that, www.expertsonair.fm, like a radio station.
Right. So what I know is that all the 2-letter ones are actually country codes. 2-letter domains are all country codes. Oh. So socialmediahouse.to is actually Tonga. So FR is a country code, like a URL country code. I was just curious. Yeah.
But you
can play on them because IO, like all those websites you see with IO, that's like Indian Ocean or some like place like that. Like that's a place, a country. All the 2-letter ones are countries. I just learned that a couple of weeks ago. I was like,
cool. Okay, I'm going to go Google that after we talk. Finish.
Awesome. Well, look, it was an absolute pleasure. I'll link you up in the show notes, but expertsonair.fm is where you can find Melanie and anything you need in the podcasting world. I appreciate you coming on.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Thanks. Bye.